That's amazing. Thank you, team. Thank you, everyone who gets here early to make that happen, that atmosphere, so you can encounter the presence of God. It's not just the people you see on stage. It's the people at the back. It's the people looking after other people's kids. There was a whole crowd here at 8 o'clock this morning. Balloons were going everywhere. Thank you, team. So we're carrying on with the teaching series we've been doing at the moment called Pre-Decide. So if it's your first time today, you can catch up the other messages on our YouTube. But it's all about how we can pre-decide certain things to help our lives go in the direction we want them to go in. And today I'm going to be speaking about a quality that has the greatest potential to impact your life. It can be the key to your spiritual strength, the key to your physical health, to your relationships, to your finances. It can be the key to you achieving everything you want to achieve in your life. Does anybody want to know what it is? Yeah? Well, it is I'm going to say this carefully because I keep saying it wrong at home. I keep saying all kinds of things, but it is your consistency. So far I've called it like convictioncy and conveniency. It's not that, it's your consistency. Consistency is when we repeat the same thing, we do the same thing, we build a habit into our lives. See, we can have all kinds of goals, things we want to do, ways we want to live, but if we don't get on and do them every day, we're not going to see a change. Lots of us are good at, in the moment, big bursts of energy. Yeah, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to, never eat chocolate again. And we do it for one day, which turns to lunchtime, which turns to 10 in the morning, and then it's all kind of over. Or maybe we do it for one day, but that's kind of it. But consistency is about building rhythms into your life that help you get to where you want to go. So your consistency has all this potential to impact your life. We all have good ideas, good intentions, but we can have all the money, all the time, all the friends and support in the world, but if we can't be consistent, we're going to struggle to ever develop successfully in any area. See, consistency builds good habits, it builds great relationships, it contributes to a healthy lifestyle, and it builds a healthy spiritual lifestyle. So I was thinking, what is something I am good at consistently? What could I share as an example consistent? So I was trying to think, and do you know what I came up with? The only thing I managed to do consistently is be inconsistent. Sean, the intentions are there, but the struggle to follow through is real. The goals, the plans, the aspirations. Maybe you feel similar. We have a habit, we take it up for a few days, a few weeks, but consistency can start to wane. We live a short walk away from the primary school my kids attend. And when we moved to that house, I was like, yeah, I'm going to walk them to school every day, and had this picture in my mind, them skipping happily along. We've got plenty of time because, of course, we were all up and ready. We're picking daisies on the way to school. We get there before the doors open. And, I look with smiling, friendly mum face at the other mums bedraggled rushing up the path, because I've been there in plenty of time with my children with the hair brushed and everything in order, and no one's forgotten their lunch. And for a time, we did walk to school, although there wasn't the daisies and everyone remembering their lunch part, because we only had one car, and Marcus would be out in the car, so I had no choice but to walk to school, and we made it by the skin of our teeth every day. Then we got another car, so now I had my own car, and the temptation, which we spoke about last week, became very real for me to let everyone go half an hour longer for us to use the car to get to school. So it turned out that we started to walk to school maybe twice a week instead. And then we started to put in things. So we don't walk to school if it's too hot, because we all get flustered. We don't walk if it's too cold, because it's cold. We don't walk if it's icy. We don't walk if it's windy. We don't walk if it's raining, obviously. And now it turns out that we basically don't walk to school. In fact, I could probably count on both hands the amount of times we've walked to school this year. And by both hands, I mean one hand, the amount of times that we have walked to school, because we're never ready, we're running late, we've forgotten something. The consistency just isn't there anymore. And the truth is, once we stopped walking all the time, we soon found that we do it none of the time. And that can happen in our lives. Once we stop doing something all the time, we soon quickly find it becomes that we do it none of the time. We saw this happen in our Sunday gatherings during the pandemic. We couldn't get to church physically, and so it became something that we did none of the time, leaving our house and coming to church. And now, for some people, it's still something that they do none of the time, because our habit faded away. So we might plan to eat healthily or to save money or to exercise or to contact our friends more. But unless we manage to build these great ideas into a consistent habit in our lives, they just become entirely pointless, great ideas. But one person who had the same battle as us to build things consistently into his life was the Apostle Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament. And I really identify with this verse he writes in Romans 7. I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate to do, I do. There was a lot of do's in that, wasn't there? But I'm like, I've never felt more understood, because what he's saying is, over here is all these things I want to do, all these good ideas, good intentions, ways I want to live my life. They're all what I want to do, and I see them, but I don't do them. And over here are all the things I don't want to do, yet here I am doing them. Anybody identify with that? Yeah? And the Apostle Paul, he says, I do not do what I want to do, but I do what I hate to do, and I do not understand myself. And I'm like, yeah, there was a lot of do's there, Paul, but I hear what you're saying. You're saying there's all these things I want to do. I know what I should be doing. I even know how to do them, but I don't always do them. I don't always do them. And somehow I end up over here doing the things I don't want to do, like getting up half an hour late, driving to school instead of walking, and many other things. I don't understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. And it's frustrating, isn't it? But this series is all about recognizing that our decisions determine our direction, and our direction determines our destiny. We all want it, the great destiny. We all want the life well lived. But it's like we know what to do, but actually leaving this place and getting on and doing it is a different matter. So we're talking about improving our decision-making by pre-deciding. And last week, Marcus looked at temptation, and this week we're looking, how can we pre-decide to be consistent? So when it gets tough, and it will, when it's raining in the morning, and it does, when we make a mistake and mess up, and we will, when we get tired, and we do, we can still keep going. We can still be consistent. And there's two people in my life that have been incredibly consistent in two different areas that I thought these are a great example. One is my Auntie Gwen. She is my mum's sister. And my grandma had 9 children. So my Auntie Gwen and my mum are one of 9 children. But don't worry, we're not planning to follow in their footsteps. Now, of these 9 children, my aunts and uncles, they've all got children. They've also got husbands and wives. And now their children, such as me, I'm one of them, also have children. So I think my Auntie Gwen, she must have 16 nieces and nephews, and then however many more great nieces and nephews, including my 3 children. And she never, ever, ever, never, ever misses anyone's birthday. She sends a card. It arrives like 2 days before your birthday with the date ready, so you know this is a birthday card from great Auntie Gwen for one of my children, or for me, or for Marcus. And I'm just like, who is this woman? How does she remember this many people's birthdays and all their cards? Because my birthday strategy is that Moonpig sends me one of those reminder things saying, oh, it's going to be like so-and-so's birthday. And I'm like, oh, yeah, great. And then I wait till like the night before the birthday and panic purchase on Moonpig. Or my calendar reminds me it's going to be their birthday. So I'm like, yeah, I got this. Go to town, get the card, write it, put it on the side, cross it off in my mind. Why is it still on the side 2 weeks after their birthday? I just can't understand it. What is wrong with me? I've got no consistency in the habit of people's birthdays, apart from if I celebrate your birthday with you, you can guarantee it will be days after your birthday that, I recall and bring the card. The second is my husband, Marcus. He was like, I'm not going to eat any sweet things. I'm not going to eat any cakes, any chocolate, any sweets. And I was like, that's crazy. And also, I don't want him to do it because it restricts me, and then I won't be able to eat as many sweet things. And I keep thinking, we could go out for afternoon tea. Oh, there's no point. Marcus won't eat any cakes. I'll have to eat all the cakes. He'll eat all the sandwiches. It's no wonder I look like this. But I was like, why do you have to give it up, Marcus? Why can't you just cut down on it, once a week, once a day? He was like, I can't do it. He's like, if I'm not consistent in cutting it out, I'm not going to be able to do it. So he gave it up. And I think it's like nearly 2 years since he ate any sweet thing. And that just seems like impossible to me. But it's because of his consistency to do it. He was like, I know myself. I can't only eat one, so I'd rather eat none. And he's achieved that through consistency. And the truth is, successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally. We are not what we do sometimes. We are what we do consistently. And birthday cards are nice to receive, and being healthy is important. But there's other stuff that's even more significant for people who want to have the destiny God has called them to. Other habits we need to build into our life consistently, but yet the struggle is real. So if you know consistency matters, but you also know I do not do what I do want to do, what I do want to do thing, then this message is for you. The power of consistency. And Daniel is one guy in the Bible who really gets consistency, who really models it for us. And what happens with Daniel when he's a young guy, probably a young teenager, he gets taken into captivity. So he's taken from Jerusalem to Babylon to be indoctrinated. That is where they took loads of the young men and just tried to make them forget that they were God's children, make them forget the Torah, the law that they followed, make them forget the ways of God's people, make them forget their God and teach them the ways of the Babylonians. So they ate Babylonian food, they dressed like Babylonians, they were given Babylonian names. They did the stuff the Babylonian people did. They wanted to brainwash the Israelite culture out of them. But Daniel, he remains consistent to the way of life that he's learned, to the rules and the laws that God has given, and to the way God has asked us to live. And Daniel starts to rise through the leadership ranks of the Babylonians. He proved himself more capable than the others, the Bible says. And because of his great ability, the king made plans to place Daniel over the entire empire. Now, the other officials and administrators don't like that. They're like, who's Daniel to come and rise up above us? So what they do is they try and dig up some dirt on Daniel, try and look through his past, find something to cancel him. And we see this happen all the time, don't we, in our culture? Dig up some dirt on a politician, on a celebrity, get them finished. Something they said on Twitter 20 years ago on the day it was invented. Now that can just finish you off. So these guys, they looked through Daniel's past and they raked through it and tried to find something that he'd done, something that they could blame him for. It says this in Daniel chapter 6, verse 4. The other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel handled government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize him or condemn him. He was faithful. He was always responsible, and he was completely trustworthy. They concluded, our only chance of finding grounds to accuse Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So how amazing was Daniel? He was always faithful. He was always responsible. He was always trustworthy. He built some great stuff into his life, and there was nothing in his past to condemn him. So because they couldn't find anything, they decided to tell the king, let's say that it's now illegal to worship anyone other than the king, because they knew Daniel worshipped God. So they passed this law, and the king approves it and says, anyone who doesn't worship only me will be thrown into a den of lions. What did Daniel do in that situation? A man who was always faithful, always consistent, always trustworthy. Daniel 6:10, when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down, as usual, in his upstairs room, with the windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to God. Daniel went home as usual, and he did just what he had always done. He did what he had built into his life through a consistent pattern, through a consistent habit that said 3 times a day, I'm going to pray to God. That's what keeps me going. That's what gives me strength. That's what gives me life. And so no matter what the law says, no matter what the king decrees, Daniel went home, knelt down as usual, and did 3 times a day what he had always done. And so, with Daniel's great consistency, amazing faithfulness, trustworthiness, and reliability, the king said, it's okay, never mind, let it go. No, Daniel was thrown into a den of lions for his consistent faithfulness, for his consistent trusting in God, for his consistent habit of praying to God first over and above what anybody else said. And so Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. But I'm sure you all know what happened. The angels came, shut the mouths of the lions. Daniel was unharmed. The king was overjoyed that Daniel hadn't been harmed, ordered he be lifted from the den. It says this in Daniel 6:23, not a scratch was found on Daniel, for he had trusted in God. He wasn't harmed because he had trusted in God. So the question is, when did Daniel learn to trust in God? When did he learn to trust in God? And the answer is he didn't learn it in the den of lions. He learned it on his knees 3 times a day, praying to God. He didn't learn to trust God in the moment of crisis when he desperately needed help and he thought, I'd better reach out to God right now to shut the mouths of the lions because this is a serious situation. Help me, God, help me now. I know I haven't prayed for 3 years, but please come right now. I'm in a time of crisis. Daniel learned to trust God in his consistent habit of every day, no matter what the law said, no matter what the other culture around him dictated to him. I'm going to pray to my God. I'm going to know my God. So he learned not in the heat of the moment to rely on God. He learned through faithfully, consistently getting to know his God. He trusted God. And then in this crazy life-defining moment that we all, even now, are talking about Daniel in the lion's den, he had already pre-decided how he was going to act. He didn't know he was going to be thrown into a den of lions. He didn't know what the situation would arise in his life. But one thing he had pre-decided that he knew is, I will faithfully trust God, whatever happens, whatever circumstance I find myself in. He pre-decided how he would act, how he would endure. He would trust God. So then, in the fear of the moment, when he finds the king has signed a law to say that only the king can be worshipped, people could only pray to him, Daniel didn't go into crisis because he already pre-decided, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to pray to my God 3 times a day. He already pre-decided, I'm not going to bow down to any earthly kings. I'm going to pray to the one true and living God. And church, what we are deciding now to do consistently is what will see us through the lion's den moments in our lives. Daniel pre-decided. So he was going to do what he usually did, what he always did, and he was going to be consistent. You can't wait until you're facing bankruptcy to decide that you're going to start to save. You can't wait until you can't breathe because you're so overweight that you're going to decide not to eat as much chocolate. You can't wait. You can't afford to wait until the law of the land says it's not okay to worship God. It's not okay to pray to God before you decide. This is something I'm going to build into my life consistently. I'm going to order my life around this book, the Bible, and this king only. And I don't care what anybody out there says about it, because that's something I'm consistently building into my life. Yeah. So I'm not going to decide in the moment. I'm going to pre-decide right now. This is me. I'm going to make a stand. This is the way I'm going to live. This is how I'm going to do it. And so no matter what comes against us, because things do come against us. And Daniel, probably when he was a young boy and his parents taught him, we're going to pray 3 times a day, he never expected he was going to be taken captive, shipped off to a foreign land and put into a situation where he might be thrown into a den of lions. But none of that stuff mattered because he decided when he was a young boy, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to get on and do it consistently each day. So I want to give us 3 takeaways from today to help us about how we can pre-decide to be consistent in our lives. And the 3 things are this. Number 1, start with the why. Number 2, plan to fail. And number 3, fall in love with the process. So let me just go through those for you. Number 1, starting with the why. Why? Why did Daniel pray consistently? He did it because he was devoted to God. It wasn't a show. It wasn't because his parents told him that he had to. It wasn't just a good intention. It wasn't a good idea. It wasn't just that he had a desire to. He was devoted. He loved God. He knew he had this life-giving relationship with God, and he wasn't going to let go of it. He couldn't live without it. He had a powerful why. And so when he left his homeland, he still prayed. When his parents weren't there, he still prayed. When it became difficult, he still prayed. When he was faced with the lions, he still prayed because his why was strong enough. His why was important enough that it carried him through. Even when it was illegal, he still did it because he knew the why was more important than the what would happen if. Why do you want to be more consistent in that area? Whatever that area is springing into your mind, why? What is the why? Because so many of us wait until New Year's Day to start our why, or till Monday, or for another new week. I tell you, if you're waiting until New Year's Day to start that habit you want to build consistently, it's not going to last. The why has got to be much, much more powerful than that. If it's important, if the why is there, you will leave this place and you will not eat the chocolate again. You will not never give to the church again. You will not never pray again. Whatever the habit is that you're thinking in your mind, because it's not born out of willpower. It's born out of devotion. The king said you can't pray, but Daniel had a why that drove him, that said, I need to pray. I can't live without it. Whatever the punishment, whatever the loss, I'm going to consistently keep going. For me, I sometimes think it would be nice to be like Marcus and not eat chocolate all the time. I've had to have a strong word with Michelle and Amber, our youth and kids pastor, because in this back cupboard behind me is a giant bag of leftover Easter eggs. And I emailed Michelle in the week, and I was like, can you please, kids team, use the Easter eggs? Can you use them as prizes? Can you use them in games? Can you melt them down and create something out of them? But can you not leave them in the cupboard? Because during the week, when I'm here on my own, seeking the Lord, doing many work and jobs, I start to get hungry. And there's a plate over there with apples, but they don't tempt me as much as the bag of Easter eggs. I said to Michelle, if you do not use the Easter eggs, there won't be any Easter eggs left, because I've eaten 2 in the last week, Michelle. Please move them, hide them, do something with the Easter eggs. And when I think, yeah, maybe I should give up the chocolate, the why just ain't there for me. Like, it's not as powerful. Like, I can see myself saying, yeah, I'm going to limit myself. Maybe I should stick to that conviction, but the why just isn't powerful enough. When I think about a life without chocolate, just being honest, I'm just thinking, I'm not bothered for that. Do you know what I mean? Like, the why isn't really there. I know Mark Bean understands me because he's got sweet tooth like me. And if you've got a sweet tooth, if you've not got one, you just don't understand. You're just like, oh, get over yourself, build some discipline in life. But, that's not going to happen for me. I don't think I'm ever going to be standing here saying, yes, I've given up chocolate. Like Ellie over here, she's given up chocolate for like 100 years or something. I don't even want to think about that. Honestly. But what is the why? If you've got a why that drives you, you can do it. It's not just willpower. It's not just good intentions. Daniel was devoted. And the things that I am committed to, the things I am devoted to, the why is strong enough to help me do. And when I'm tired in the morning and I've been up 3 times in the night and I don't really want to read my Bible because I know it's going to mean I'm going to have to drive to school and not walk because we're all running behind, I know in myself I can be consistent with this. It's important to me. I've got a why. I need this to get me through the day. I have to have this time. That's important to me. I might have to have some chocolate whilst I read my Bible just to wake me up, but I'm going to do it because I have a why for that thing. So you need to find your why and start with the why. Number 2 is plan to not be perfect. Do you think Daniel ever missed one of his 3 times a day prayers? What do you think? I mean, Daniel, this amazing guy, faithful, consistent. I'm telling you now, Daniel missed him. He missed him sometimes. How do I know? Because he's a man, a human person. Daniel, just an ordinary guy. He missed him. He missed them sometimes. I guarantee sometimes he had to work late for the king. Sometimes he had a stomach bug. Sometimes he missed some of his prayer times because life happens. Stuff gets in the way and we don't always get to do what we want to do. Sometimes we mess up, sometimes we miss one, sometimes a day goes by. If a day goes by, try not to let it be 2. Try not to let it be 2. But accept, we're not always going to be perfect. Plan to fail. There's a science experiment, I've shared about it before, where they had 2 groups of people and they wanted to lose weight and they were split them into group A and group B and they gave them cakes and they said to them, you can eat these cakes today, and all the dieters were kind of like me with the Easter eggs, and they all took a cake. Then they went to group A and they said, guys, you've eaten a cake, you gave in to the temptation, but never mind, we're here for the rest of the week, you can carry on. And everyone in group A quit. They said, there's no point now, I've eaten a cake, I just may as well go back to it, I'll try again next week, it's not going to happen. And everyone in group B, they said, yeah, you've eaten a cake, but these cakes were fat-free. They were sugar-free, gluten-free, dairy-free. Nobody knows what they were made of, but they cost 10 times more than ordinary cakes. But basically, they were negative calories when you ate those cakes. You've not committed a crime, you've not committed a sin, you're not going to get fatter. These cakes were health food. And everybody in that group carried on. They carried on with the healthy eating program. They're like, oh, I'm not messed up. I'm going to carry on. And how many of us can identify with that when we have a goal in mind and then we mess up one time? We're like, well, it's too late now. I've eaten an Easter egg. No point trying again for the rest of the week. Or, it's too late now. I've missed a day on my streak, on my Bible, on YouVersion. Missed a day on that plan. Can't catch up. May as well not carry on reading the Bible. I was going to read the whole thing in a year, but I'm 5 days behind now. So it's not going to happen by the end of the year. So try again in 2023. That's going to be my year. And there's something in our minds, this desire for perfection. We want to get it right every time. And I know that's true for me, but we need to plan that sometimes we are going to fail. That's just life. That's human nature. You might say, I want a plan to give to church, but some weeks you get tempted by the ASOS sale and you've not got any money left and you can't give to church. You need to nail that on the head right now and say, okay, some weeks I'm going to mess up, but this is something I want to try and build into my life with consistency. Remember, just like Paul said, we do not do what we want to do, but what we hate to do, we do. That's not an excuse. It's just reality. Even the Apostle Paul has written that for us in Scripture. So you plan to pre-decide to be consistent, but I tell you now, you're going to fail some days. So let's just all suck it up right now and say, I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail. Some days I'm going to fail. Make peace with it, get back up, and go again. Being consistent is not the same as being perfect. We need to give ourselves grace so that we can build into our lives some consistency. It's actually a fear of failure, a fear of not being perfect that hangs as an idol above some of us, and it stops us from moving forward and stops us from doing things, and maybe even right down to following Jesus. Some people say, well, I can't follow Jesus because if I follow Jesus, I know that next week or the week after, I'm going to swear at somebody. I'm going to look at another woman, I'm going to look at another guy and think bad thoughts, or I'm going to mess up, so I can't do it because I'm not going to be perfect, and that's unattainable for me, so I'd rather just stay how I am and not change anything. And that happens to all of us in different areas where we think, there's this thing I really want to do, I really want to build this habit into my life, whether it's praying 3 times a day like Daniel, whether it's how we read our Bible, whether it's how we, really have a desire to invite our neighbours round, but then we start to think, well, I invite my neighbours round, they're going to think she's not got a very clean house and my kids might misbehave or might not answer when they speak to them, and then they're going to think she's got rude children, and then they're going to think that's not very good for someone who's a minister of a church, and then they're probably going to think worse of me than what they do right now, so it would probably be best if I don't invite my neighbour round after all, because we don't want it to go wrong. But I'm going to plan to fail so that I can build things into my life. Otherwise, we're going to stay the same. You're going to be the same person you are right now, 10 years, in 20 years, the same. So we've got a plan to not be perfect, plan to fail. Find our why, plan to fail. And finally, we've got to fall in love with the process. Our eldest daughter, Karis, has been having piano lessons for the last 2 years, and she absolutely hates it. She hates it. To the point now where we've had to go to a piano teacher and say, she doesn't want to carry on anymore. I'm really sorry. It's not to do with you, it's us, Because the ratio of nagging, shouting, and time spent encouraging her toward the piano to even look at it and put her fingers on it is now 10 to 1 to the amount of notes actually played. It's become a burden on all of us. And to the point that now the other children are like, I never want to learn to play the piano. You get shouted at every day. You have to sit on the chair till you've done it. There's scales and notes, and mum gets cross and everyone's crying, and we hate music. We hate Jesus. We hate the church. That's how bad it's getting. So when we went to a piano teacher and said, you've been amazing, thank you so much for the last 2 years, we're really glad Karis has a basic understanding of the piano, even though she hates it. We didn't say the hate part. But unfortunately, it's not going to work out. She's not going to carry on with the piano. The teacher said, but I was just about to say, I've written in her book today for you to order the exam books for her grade 1. She's ready to do the exam. And so Marcus tried to do this the first time. He handled it. He came home. I said, did you quit? He said, I tried to quit, but she said she's going to do the grade 1. And I didn't know. I thought, does she need to do the grade 1? So we didn't quit. So I was like, okay, I'm finishing this the next week. We're quitting. But we're sending Seren instead. So let's see how it goes with the second child. But this had me thinking, what is the hardest What is the hardest piano grade to pass? What is the hardest one? And anybody who knows music will think straight away, well, it's grade 8. That's the highest grade. It's the hardest grade. You've got to know how to read every word on the music, every note, every line, every dot. You've got to play these pieces perfectly. You've got to do the singing, the scales, the arpeggios, the broken chords. You've got to know your stuff to be grade 8 piano. You've got to put in hours and hours and hours of work. You've got to know your why and be devoted to playing the piano if you want to pass grade 8. But actually, the hardest grade to pass, grade 1, is the hardest grade to pass because you know nothing when you start playing the piano. You don't know what the dots mean. You don't know the notes. You're not used. You don't have a habit of practicing every day. So you go from nothing. You start from nothing. And the hardest one to pass is grade 1 because that's where you have to build into your life the consistent habit. I want to learn to play the piano. I'm going to practice every day. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to entail. By the time you get to grade 8, you already passed grade 7. It's just the next step. You're already used to practicing every day. Your fingers are already used to wiggling everywhere. It's not as painful as my child would make out. She's like, my hands hurt, my wrists hurt, my legs hurt, my back hurts. I can't play the piano. It's not that bad by the time you get to grade 8 because you're used to the habit of playing the piano. You already consistently play the piano. By grade 8, you're building on what you already know. And sometimes it's our nature. Instead of falling in love with the process of getting to play the piano, we fall in love with the end goal. The end goal, I'm going to pass grade 8. I'm going to be like the next Mozart. I'm going to write all these concertos. They won't need any more band at the church because there will just be me on the piano with all my buttons and controls. Oh no, that's just Mark Bean. I'll be able to handle it because I'll be so good at playing the piano. But grade 8 is a very, 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 very long way away from when you are 6 years old sitting on the stool with these piano books, pressing middle C over and over and over. And it's too far. It's too far. There's a long process in between. And if we don't fall in love with the process from playing middle C over and over to being grade 8, it's not going to happen. And so many of us set our goals. We're going to leave from this place. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to lose 10 stone. You ain't even going to recognize me next week because I'm going to be 10 stone lighter of all the Easter eggs I have not eaten. Or I'm going to read the Bible. I ain't even going to read it in a year. I'm going to read it this week. When I come back next week, I'll know more than any person in there. Just sit me on a phone with questions. People can come and ask me. I will know the answer because I'm going to read the whole Bible this week. I'm going to pray. I'm going to build a consistent habit of prayer. I'm not even going to have time to go to work this week because I'm going to be praying on my knees like Daniel, facing toward Jerusalem 3 times a day. I'm going to do it 6 times a day or 7 or 10 times a day. That is my goal. And our goal is so far removed from where we are right now, and we don't love the process of getting there, that it never happens. We've got to fall in love with the process. What is the next step on our journey? Is it that we can read the Bible just once this week? Is it that we can read it every day? Is it that we can pray every day this week? Is it that we can set a timer on our phone for a time each day where we're not too busy at work and we just say, I'm going to give 5 minutes now to pray? Is that an extra thing we can do to build into our lives a new habit of consistency? I try and explain this principle to my kids all the time about giving them money. We give them £10 a month, tight, I know, pocket money. And I'm like, you need to give some of your money to church. Like, Mum, we only get £10. If I give £1 away, I'm only going to have £9. Can't buy anything for £9. It's easy for you, Mum. You've got loads of money. You get all your money. Yeah, it's easy for you to give money to church. Like, actually, the more money you have, the harder it is to give your money away because you're not just giving £1 away. Everybody here, I'm guessing, thinking, looking around, we can all afford to give £1 away, but we don't all want to give £50 away or £100 away or £1,000 away. So the more you have, the harder it gets. And they're just looking at me like it was something an old person would say. But I'm like, you don't know you're born. You know my pocket money? £2. £2 I used to get. And I used to give 20p away. I did. We had those old-fashioned Smarty tubes with the cap on, and you had to put 20p's in and save up your tube and take it to church. And I did it. And now it's not difficult for me to give 10% of my income away. It's difficult for me to give more away, so that's not a boast. But because when I was 8 and 9 and 10, I gave my 20p's away. So then when my pocket money increased with inflation and over time, it wasn't so hard to give £1 away or to give £5 away. It's easier to build a habit of consistency when you've got a next step, not just an end goal. You need to say, what is the win for me for this week, for this year, for this month, rather than what is the win for me for my life. You can't go from nothing to grade 8 piano overnight. We've got to fall in love with the process of getting there. Daniel might not have missed one of his 3 times a day in these years that we're talking about in Babylon. He might have been there on it, but he definitely missed some when he was a boy. He definitely missed some when he was a teenager. It's the things we do every day, consistently, that build a great life, not the things we do occasionally. So we have to find our why with any habit we want to be consistent with, any habit we want to add to our lives. We have to plan to fail sometimes. Acknowledge right now, I'm not always going to get this right. And we need to fall in love with the process of getting there, not just the end goal. And the point is, with all of this and all the things we're talking about in this series, it's not just with our own willpower and with our own strength. It's with God's help. With God's help, I am consistent. And we might feel, well, on my own, I'm not very consistent. You might feel like me. I'm looking through my life. What do I do consistently? Being consistent. Marcus said I could say I consistently get up with snot on me. And I was like, that's not a very good thing to say, but I have got snot on my legs. But yeah, I was like complaining to him before, I've got snot on me. He was like, well, at least you're consistent. Thanks. With God's help, we can be consistent. With God's help. With God's help, I am consistent. And you can see on the slide, on the I am, the different habits that we're talking about. I am faithful. I am consistent. We're going to be going through these over the next few weeks. So it's going to be, I think it's going really well. We're all taking something from it. I know I am. And I just want us to finish by literally closing our eyes just now and thinking in your mind, not what are the 50 things you want to change. Not what the grade 8s are, but what is a next step for you? What is the one thing you would like to change that's going to help you, that you can pre-decide right now, today, I'm going to be more consistent in this area. So when I'm tired of a morning, or when there's apples and cakes on the side, or when it's raining and there's a car available to me, what am I going to do? And just in your mind right now, just pre-decide that one thing. It's not what you're going to do with your own strength. It's what you're going to do with God's help. And it might be what you're going to do with the help of people in your world, with your husband, wife, with your kids, with a friend, with someone sitting near you today. Together as a community, what is it? What is your one thing? And just set that in your mind right now. And Father, we just lift up our lives and our hearts to you today. We've sung a song this morning, You Can Have It All. And it's very easy to sing, but it's a lot harder to put into practice, God. And this is just one. Each of us is thinking of one thing in our lives that we would like to improve, to help us go in a better direction, to help us be closer to you, to help us live in a way that honors you. And Father, we ask for your help with that one thing, that we might be more consistent in it today, this week, this month, this year, that we pre-decide right now, I'm going to be consistent in this area. And with your help, God, we can be consistent. In Jesus' name, amen.